Hello, everyone. I'm back after some time bringing you another episode of Regular Show, an episode that talks about the feeling of anger and the failure to control it. This episode shows us a bit of life from Benson's perspective and how Mordecai and Rigby ruin it. In this episode, it's really hard not to feel sorry for Benson and angry at the two of them, and if you didn't need more reasons to dislike our little duo of idiots, congratulations, you just got more without asking. So if you're already fed up with my lovely face, I just ask you to leave a like and maybe even consider subscribing. It costs nothing and helps a lot. And without further ado, let's get started. The episode begins with Pops trying to catch a butterfly, and in the middle of it, he hears Benson yelling at Mordecai and Rigby. Although these are events that we as viewers are already accustomed to, Pops feels very uncomfortable with the situation. After that, a sequence of yelling begins, further disturbing Pops, and as Benson's superior, he decides to do something about it, calling Benson to a private meeting where Pops starts by saying he was concerned about Mordecai and Rigby.
Busted, Benson! Busted!
Benson, thinking the problem was with them, says that the next screw-up they make will be the last and they would finally get fired. But to Benson's surprise this time, they weren't necessarily the problem. Or at least that's what Pops says. He explains to Benson that yelling at other people is morally wrong and that there is never an acceptable reason to do so, saying that Benson was forbidden to yell at Mordecai and Rigby, and if he broke this rule, he could consider himself fired. I think in this case, the term yelling could be a parallel for any form of violence, whether it is verbal, physical, or anything else. So every time I say something like yelling, hitting, or any manifestation of aggression, I may also be referring to other things that the chosen term does not cover. Although this ideology of Pops is somewhat childish and immature for many people, it is this kind of thinking that sustains the peace of our world. In the very laws imposed by society about it, it says that aggression in any form is unacceptable. Hitting a child or an elderly person in the eyes of justice is technically the same thing, and you will end up in jail for it. But in these same rules, there are loopholes and situations that tolerate aggression as being socially acceptable, and an example of that is the famous self-defense, which I believe is Benson's case. Wait, so are you saying Benson yells to defend himself? From whom exactly? These are great two questions, and for the first one, I say that maybe defending is a strong word. I think it would be more a way of standing his ground, and for the second, the answer comes from our favorite duo. You see, whether they want it or not, we can't deny that these two are indeed a threat to Benson's life. Their recklessness and irresponsibility put not only his job, but also Benson's own life at risk. We are so used to seeing Benson giving orders, we forget that in reality, he is far from being the ultimate authority in the park. Just as someone has the power to fire Mordecai and Rigby, someone has the power to fire Benson. But the difference is that Benson takes his job much more seriously than the other two, and in many episodes, we see him saying that job was literally all he had. So why doesn't he just fire the two of them at once? Well, neither you nor I know the reason for that, but I think it's because Benson deep down in his heart, he likes Mordecai and Rigby. He wants them to mature and become better people, and yelling at them is a way to promote that maturation. Benson has many reasons to fire these two if he wanted, but he prefers to keep talking, and that's more or less what he tries to explain to Pops.
What morale? Those slackers never do anything unless you yell at them.
There's never a reason to yell at anyone.
They give me a million reasons every day. You just want me to be nice to them?
But there's a small catch. That's not true. Even with Benson yelling, threatening, and asserting his authority, Mordecai and Rigby simply don't listen, and then the question arises, what should Benson do? Of course, firing is still an option, but for the sake of the series, let's consider that this choice doesn't exist, and also for what I've just said. Pops understands that he can't be nice to them, but asks him to at least be pleasant and, above all, not to yell at all regardless of the situation. Benson keeps denying this, so then Pops pulls out the last ace in the hole and threatens to fire him right there. Benson, still bothered, accepts. After all, he had no other choice. Right after leaving that same meeting with Pops, he comes face to face with the two of them, and again, they act like two lazy children, infuriating Benson again. He decides to seek help online, and in a way he manages to find it, but even so it wasn't enough to deal with Mordecai and Rigby. Again, Benson yells, and for the second and last time, Pops warns about this problem, meaning that next time Benson would be fired on the spot. While he was walking through the park, he comes face to face with the two little friends again. who were again doing everything except what they were supposed to do. He goes in search of more help, and we have a flashback from his past which shows us that Benson wasn't always like this and quite the opposite. He was someone much calmer and shy, but because he was subject to an environment where only those who yelled got what they wanted, he ended up becoming the way we know him. He developed this short fuse, and these experiences shaped Benson's character, showing that he was just a product of the environment. The problem starts when we remember that this environment would be temporary, but these personality traits stayed in Benson's life forever. Being in the park, Benson wouldn't need to yell at anyone to get what he wanted, and that's what Pops wanted to show Benson. There was no need to yell at Mordecai and Rigby to keep them in line. Times changed, and although aggression was once a factor that put food on the table and children in the house, nowadays we no longer need it for almost anything. If in the past only the strongest ate and reproduced, nowadays that's just bullshit. Our knowledge and intellectuality can open many more doors than our biceps and fists. Many other ways to resolve conflicts have been created, leaving the use of aggressions, whether in verbal or physical form, something increasingly less appreciated and even punishable. That's what Pops wanted Benson to see, but his plan fails when Benson doesn't know any other way to deal with the issue. For him, there was only this option, or simply do nothing, and instead of trying to opt for a normal conversation with the two, which probably wouldn't work, he preferred to keep it all to himself. Mordecai and Rigby, despite being adults, throughout the series, they are portrayed as two children. And guess what's the best way to deal with a child? This episode tried to make Benson seem like a bad person, which unfortunately is the thought of many people, but in reality only managed to make Mordecai, Rigby, and Pops catch that image. In Pops' case, we can even overlook it, but as for Mordecai and Rigby, it's incredible how these two can ruin the lives of the people around them. All Benson wanted was to have a normal life, with a normal job and normal employees. But the existence of these two ends up complicating everything even more. That flashback showed us that Benson isn't naturally like that. It's not like he enjoys going around yelling at people and such. He's not like that with the other park employees. But these two keep testing his patience to its limits. Benson was already boiling and had already reached the limit of his patience. Every step he made was burning the grass. He was all red and breathing like a steam machine, and just to bring to a perfect end, he finds the two messing up again and unable to yell. He becomes this thing that destroys the park. Skip says that only by releasing this pent-up feeling will things return to normal in many quotes. But even so, Pops doesn't think it's right to yell at the two. It was only after a lot of drama that Pops allows Benson to unleash his fury, and while he was doing so, one of the things he says is that he does all that in an attempt to teach them a little responsibility, which shows that despite everything, he was just being a cool boss to the two. Throughout the regular show series, Benson has been shown to us as a boring and unpleasant guy, and a lonely person that no one wants to be around, but I think that actually he, along with Rigby and Eileen, are the best characters that the series could have offered. At the end of the episode, he says in a calm and tranquil voice that if they didn't fix everything, they would be fired, but the funny thing is that they don't even hear what he said, showing that these two really can't hear anything coming from others' mouth. This episode was really cool and surely deserves your like. If you want to continue with me, check out my latest release. It was a video about the story of the relationship between Rigby and Eileen. So if you want to take a look, the video is right there. Thank you very much for everything, and if you've already subscribed, thank you very much, and see you next time.
Yeah, but the hose!
Oh, what? It's too hard to get the hose